Hey, I'm Org, and in this video I'm going to review the Tier 2 US destroyer, the Sampson. And I'm going to be blunt. As it stands, this is my least favourite destroyer in the game. Although in the next patch it will be getting a very useful decrease, I suppose, to its turret reverse time, and possibly also its rate of fire, which would be a pretty big improvement for this ship. And it does of course lead to a line of very good destroyers, so it's worth passing through at least. But before we get into talking about the ship in the game, I'd like to talk about the history of these ships. The Sampson class was the last of the 1,000-tonner destroyers of the US Navy. These were 5 classes of destroyers that made up the bulk of the Navy's destroyer force before the First World War. In fact, since the United States Navy had so few cruisers, the 1,000-tonners also performed the scouting and gunboat roles that other navies expected their cruisers to perform. And this was also the reason that the first of the 1,000-tonners was designed. They were basically designed to have much longer cruising range and firepower than the previous destroyer classes of the US Navy, so that they could accompany the battle fleet and be a bit more useful in battle. The Cassin class was the first of the 1,000-tonners, and the basic design was actually only slightly modified through the next 5 classes. The Alwyn class had different engines but was otherwise the same. The O'Brien class had 21-inch torpedoes instead of 18 inches. The Tuckers were the 4th class. They were larger, heavier and faster than their predecessors, again with different engines. And then finally we have the Sampsons, which are just Tuckers with 4 extra torpedoes. And it also had the first anti-aircraft guns, 2 1-pounder guns, which they're on the Sampson in game, but you never get the opportunity to use them because you don't come up against aircraft. 6 Sampsons were built and commissioned in 1916 and 17, so all served in the First World War. For the most part they escorted American soldiers across the Atlantic and patrolled the waters around Britain and Ireland for German submarines. There were a few notable incidents in their First World War service. The USS Shaw had a rudder malfunction while escorting the cruise liner Aquitania. This resulted in the 2 ships colliding and the Shaw having almost a third of its ship cut off. The first third, or the first I think was 90 odd feet, so probably closer to a quarter than the third, but whatever. However, the crew actually managed to keep the ship sailing and they actually got it back into port where, they actually repaired it. Despite all these destroyers actively searching for U-boats, it seems like the USS Rowan was the only one to participate in sinking one. I say seem to because they dropped a bunch of dropped a bunch of depth charges and saw some oil slicks, so they probably sunk it, but you can never be certain. While that was happening, the USS Allen reported 10 engagements with German submarines, and her captain received the Navy Star. But after the war, German records showed that none of those 10 engagements happened. Of course, the Navy Star didn't get taken away, but it's a bit unusual. But perhaps that's why the Allen remained in service as a training ship, while 2 of the other Sampsons were sent into reserve, and 3 of them went and joined the Coast Guard, where they participated in the rum patrol. At the time, the United States had banned alcohol, and the Coast Guard needed patrol ships to stop people getting any alcohol into the country. Unfortunately, the pace of those operations didn't actually allow much time for maintenance on those ships, and they were all in very bad condition by the time Prohibition ended in 1933. So pretty soon after that, USS Allen was the only Sampson-class destroyer left, even though it was now mothballed in the United States Reserve Fleet as well. However, in 1940, with another war in Europe, the Allen was recommissioned. She was the only one of the 1,000-tonners to serve in the Second World War, In fact, she was present at the Battle of Pearl Harbor. She did fire her anti-aircraft guns, trying to repel the Japanese attackers, but they probably did not contribute significantly in any way to the battle. After Pearl Harbor, the Allies spent the rest of the war patrolling the Hawaiian Islands and the Eastern Pacific, and also training with friendly submarines. She would often act as the anti-submarine ship trying to catch them, which they had to hide from. Once the war ended, she was decommissioned pretty soon, and at the time was the longest serving destroyer in the US Navy. In World of Warships, the Sampson is the first destroyer in the US line, and, well, I did not find it a particularly enjoyable start to the line. It's actually a fairly stealthy ship, with a detection range of 5.9 kilometers, which can be further dropped with camouflage and commander skills. It's also fairly fast at 30 knots. It's second only to the Yumikaze at this tier, so it can get around the map quickly to where it's needed. It has a 5.3 second rudder shift time and a 500 meter turning radius, or 500 and something meter turning radius, which makes the ship fairly maneuverable, but not significantly so when compared with the Yumikaze. Its combat capacity also lags behind the Japanese destroyer. It's only 1900 hit points to the Yumikaze's 10,300. It's an armament that the Sampson is superior to the Yumikaze. It has 4 4-inch guns, which, although they are smaller... Just dodging those torpedoes. Friendly torpedoes, there's no such thing. Anyway, the Sampson has 4 104mm guns, or 4-inch guns. So they're smaller than the Japanese 120mm guns, but they fire much quicker and so have a higher DPM. The Sampson's torpedoes have a much shorter range than their Japanese counterparts, but they're otherwise superior. Well, they do slightly less damage per hit, but the Sampson has 4 on each broadside, so 8 in total, whereas the Yumikaze only gets 4 torpedoes in total. The Sampson's torpedoes are also fast for tier 2, so they do not allow their targets a lot of time to dodge. I mean, I think if the Sampsons had like even a kilometre or 2 more range on their torpedoes, they would actually be a very, very powerful ship at tier 2. But unfortunately, it only gets a 4.5 kilometre range. So, despite that, why don't I like the Sampson? Well, like all American destroyers, the Sampson has better guns than torpedoes. However, because of the short range of the guns, you have to get close to your enemies, and it's actually fairly easy for them to hit you at, the range that you're firing them at. You've only got 3 104mm guns on the broadside, and it's really not sufficient to do much damage at all. You can do about 1,000 damage per hit on the destroyers, probably the best case scenario, but against cruisers or battleships, you're generally doing between 2 and 500 damage per hit, and 3 on a broadside, 1,500 damage is the most you can do. It takes a long time to kill things unless you set them on fire. In fact, like the broadside of the Sampson is actually weaker than the tier 1, gunboat, the Erie. Well, the Sampson has very good manoeuvrability. This is actually a bit of a mixed blessing. The turret traverse at the moment is kind of slow, but as I said, it's getting increased soon. Which basically means that although you've got a 3-gun broadside, if you are turning tightly to dodge shots, you'll often only be able to bring 2 of them to bear because your front or rear turret, or bow or aft, will be taking a long time to traverse onto your new target. The Sampson also loses a lot of speed in turns, which, well, the slower you are, the easier you are for enemies to hit, so it's also not a great thing. The only real bonus that the Sampson gets is its torpedoes, and while the Sampson's torpedoes are actually very powerful, they 4 per side and each torpedo does 6,000 damage per hit, and they're fast and they've got a quick reload. It's just the 4.5 kilometre range of them means that you will probably have to take damage in order to actually fire your torpedoes, and probably also take damage to get away from whatever you just fired your torpedoes at. And unfortunately you just don't have a lot of hit points to spend even 1,000 damage or 2,000 damage to get your torpedoes off. All this means that I tend to play the Sampson as a kind of very weak light cruiser that can rapidly relocate around the battlefield and add a bit of firepower where it's needed, and also use smoke screens to escape and its speed boost to escape if it gets into trouble. I generally didn't risk my ship in open sea torpedo attacks until very late game, where removing even a single ship rapidly can be decisive. And with the Sampson is actually very effective in ambush torpedo attacks, where you use the cover of an island to approach close to an enemy without being seen. One mistake I often made in the Sampson was to try and turn away from an enemy after firing, a torpedo broadside that is. This would often cost me a lot of hit points, as I would present my full side profile to the enemy as my ship was slowing dramatically, both of which combined to make me a very easy target. Instead, what I should have done is continue to press the attack on the enemy ship, essentially firing the torpedoes on one side, then turning, firing them on the other side, then turning the other way, back to firing the first side again. So kind of despite coming close to the enemy, I'd often take less damage because I'll be presenting a much more difficult target to hit, while also securing the kill on the enemy, so all in all it's just a much better idea than trying to actually break away from your enemy. The only downside to that is, of course, if you fail to kill the enemy, you're stuck in close range with them and they'll kill you eventually. When firing the guns, I basically only ever fired high explosive. The 104mm guns just don't really have enough ammo penetration to actually really damage anything, but high explosive, it does consistent damage, although low, it is consistent, and it will occasionally set fires, which are very useful at racking up a lot of damage very quickly. Now, killing a Sampson, it's actually fairly easy. It has no armour, so you should be firing high explosive at it. Although if you have armour piercing loaded, it doesn't hurt to fire it, simply because the Sampson, it doesn't have a lot of hit points, so even over-penetrating shots will eventually kill it. I mean, 9100 hit points, that's what, 10, 11 over-penetrating 12-inch battleship shells? So if you're in, say, the Kawachi, it's a broadside and a half hitting it, which is still a lot, and you should fire high explosive, but as I say, it's not the end of the world. I find the quickest way to kill it is to aim at the rear of the ship, kind of near the waterline. This is where the rudder and engine are located, and taking away the Sampson's mobility will make it defenceless and very, very easy for you to kill. So that's kind of Sampson. As I say, it's, well, I didn't enjoy it. It's basically a gunboat that's just very weak and has torpedoes which you can use in some situations, but you will always suffer for using them. But what's perhaps the most frustrating thing about the ship is that even though I'm not a fan of it, I still actually perform very well on it in both open and closed beta. So in this match, I've gone forward to try and capture C, and I was hoping to hide behind this island, but an enemy cruiser was sneaking around behind me, so I just managed to squeeze in behind the island so it can't shoot at me, but I lost about a third of my hit points getting here, and now I'm in a bit of a precarious situation since there are enemy cruisers moving up on me. I see this one, looks like it's going to come around the corner. Check back, no, that one's fine for now. So I wait for my torpedoes to reload, and then I head around the corner to try and intercept it, and hopefully get a good ambush torpedo strike off. Unfortunately, that cruiser changes course and turns to go around the other side of the island, which means I have to expose myself a lot more than I intended to get these torpedoes off. Soon I'll be able to fire them. There we go. I aim slightly ahead of the lead indicator because I can see that that cruiser there is accelerating. And well, they look good so far, but it's going to be a little bit longer for the ship and the torpedoes to collide. That other cruiser that was coming up behind me has been killed, and the torpedoes look good. Well, one hit's enough to sink it.
Enemy cruiser foundered.
So, one cruiser down thanks to my torpedoes. I switched my guns and do a bit of long range fire at these enemy ships. And well, you can see me wiggling a bit to try and avoid return fire, not that anyone's shooting at me, but it's good practice. But because of this wiggling, my speed's down in the high 20s as opposed to the 30 knots that's the, what do you call it, the written down top speed of the ship. And basically I spend most of the games I play hanging out around the 26, 27, 28 knots mark as opposed to the 30 knot mark. Anyway, I've got my torpedoes back up again because another one of these cruisers is coming around the island and it's just within my torpedoes range. I had to manoeuvre a bit to get around behind the friendly cruiser. And I'm going to be able to get these torpedoes off in a second, just wait till the island's out of the way. And there we go. And I turn back again. I put some shots in just because it's actually on very low health. And if I'm able to start a fire, it might finish it off even without my torpedoes. But the torpedoes look good. And 2 cruisers killed through my torpedoes. Now I didn't actually take any damage in that one. Secondary guns fired at me, but they missed. And here's a 3rd cruiser coming around the island. And I can't see it anymore, but I saw where the torpedo lead indicator was telling me to aim, so I aim there. And here we go, it's a Tenru, which is a very manoeuvrable destroyer. Not destroyer, cruiser. It's almost like a destroyer, but with a lot more hit points. But fortunately for me, it's not manoeuvring at all. Just managed to capture C, and 1 hit, 2 hits, kills the Tenru. And that is how you kill 3 enemy cruisers with torpedoes in the Sampson. Basically all I did was just use that island to shield myself from them, and then they all just came straight around it, which allowed my torpedoes, well, if any of them had have turned even a little bit, my torpedoes would have missed. They're fast, but not that fast. Torpedoes, nope, way over there. But luckily they all went straight, coming around an island, and, well, they must have known I was there, or at least suspected I was there. But still, I lived, and all 3 of them are sunk. Spot an enemy destroyer, and this is... really, it should be pretty easy for the Sampson. I've already scored a couple of hits, but... I keep missing for a bit here, and I got 1 hit there. Doesn't seem to do any damage though. And unfortunately I can't actually bring my rear turret to bear because the island was in the way. And now I dodge those torpedoes even though I don't have to, and unfortunately that means that my rear turret's now facing the wrong direction, and it takes a long time to turn it around the right way. But that destroyer was sunk by my allied cruisers, so I switch fire to this destroyer, and I miss. But I'm going to have 1 more shot at it before it goes behind that island. And I get 1 hit. Does a fair bit of damage though, 500. I think the best I've ever done shooting at a destroyer from the Sampson or the Wix, which has the same guns. Actually, I think the Clemson has the same guns as well. It's about 1000 damage against an enemy destroyer, but 500's more usual. Anyway, I switched fire to that battleship for a bit there because I couldn't really hit anything else. But the destroyer's, well, spotted again, so I switched fire to it. Basically, I'm going to be able to knock this destroyer out of the game much quicker than I'm going to be able to knock that battleship out of the game. And the destroyer's actually also a pretty big threat to our team. I had my engine destroyed there by the battleship shell, but I was able to fix that pretty quickly. And the enemy destroyer's disappeared, it's gone around behind the island again. And I figure my job here, I've got to go and try and chase down that destroyer. All the other enemy ships left I can't really do much against, unless I get into torpedo range. But that destroyer I can kill pretty easily if I can see it. And I've actually stopped firing at that battleship now because I don't want anyone to know where I am. By anybody I really mean that enemy destroyer, but it does know where I am. I turned, well, the wrong way initially, and that was enough to get me killed. A single torpedo strike to the bow. I was on very low hit points, but Japanese destroyers with their stealth torpedo attacks It's a lot of fun when you're doing it, but yeah. This is the last game I'm going to show you in the Sampson, and well, it's a bit more of a conventional game for me in that I don't actually think I do any of the ambush torpedo attacks in this one. I think I'd play it more like how I'd normally play a American destroyer, which is more of a distraction and destroy killer as opposed to a torpedo attacker boat. Anyway, the enemy team have all pushed quite strongly into the cap, while our team is mostly hanging out near where we spawned. I've kind of gone forward to scout, and I was hoping to find the enemy destroyer and kill it early on, but no luck. And I decided to open fire at my maximum range at the South Carolina, just to do a little bit of damage. Especially since I can see that basically the entire enemy team is shooting at some unlucky person. Oh, I actually managed to set on fire. The shells on the Sampson, they don't do a lot of damage per hit, but if you do manage to start a fire, that will actually do a lot of damage if they don't put it out. And I keep firing away at the battleship. Managed to get a fair few hits in. Not that it means a lot, although I did force it to use its repair to put out that fire. There's another enemy battleship there which just disappeared. But I fire at it where I thought it would be. Fortunately I miss. Fire off a second broadside, this time I can actually see it. And I get a hit. The Sampson's guns are actually pretty accurate, and even at maximum range, a broadside will usually hit something the size of a battleship. I say as I miss, but usually it'll hit. Oh, I was about to think I missed again. Nope, got one more shot on. And I've actually moved into a smoke screen. It must be one of my allies set, so I can't see the battleship anymore. But it's not that important because there's a enemy cruiser coming around the bend here. And, well, I put a few shots in. I'm not actually sure if that was wise in retrospect because it hadn't spotted me yet. I'm still in the smoke screen, but well, it's spotted me now. Nope, it hasn't actually. It keeps spotting me on and off, but I put some more shots in. Luckily it's not shooting at me. And I fire my torpedoes again. And continue firing as I retreat. But basically I just want to get as much distance between myself and this cruiser as possible at the moment. I can dodge its shells fairly easily if I'm at my maximum firing range. Well, it's not quite true, but I have a chance of dodging them at my maximum firing range. Whereas at 4 kilometers, 5 kilometers, I'm not really going to. You see there, I took a fair bit of damage and had my engine wrecked, but I'm able to repair my engine and keep firing away at that St. Louis. But, well, the good news is that basically my entire team is actually heading south to help me, and, well, I'm heading north to get away from this guy, so I'm going to have a lot of fire support very soon. Bad news is that the enemy well and truly holds the cap circle, but we can live with that. We can easily decap them from our position. And I just thought this was a good looking sight here, all our battleships sailing along, firing off their guns, watching the enemy shells splash around them. Well, actually it looks like most of the enemy shells are hitting, but it's unfortunate. A few splashes there. And unfortunately when I get in amongst the battleships with their engines and guns and my guns, it actually starts being a bit more than my audio recording can actually handle, so it's going to get very crackly in a minute. But we'll have to live with it. Okay, plenty of enemy ships to choose from, or there would be if any of them were in range, but well, there's that one I can shoot at. Or maybe that battleship, no. Okay, firing away at an enemy ship. Get a couple of hits there, and then I realise that we're about to have a three-way collision here. So go hard to port, get my engine wrecked again, but I'm able to fix it. Manage to slip in between the cruiser and the battleship with only taking minimal damage, and then I can fire away at this enemy battleship. And switch over to fire my guns at this guy. And I actually missed because it's actually sitting still, that battleship, which I didn't realise at the time. And I've got my torpedoes on because there's an enemy cruiser coming around the corner here. So I suppose this is the one ambush torpedo strike I did. Yeah. I lied, I do ambush torpedoes in this one. But switch to my guns because basically I want to kill this guy as quickly as possible. It isn't behind my fleet, so it is in a position where it can... Well, it's not so much it can do a lot of damage, but it can fire on my team without my team firing back at it. And I don't really want battleships to have to turn around to get it. My torpedoes have almost arrived. I get one hit, but 4,000 damage is a fair bit. My guns are also adding to that damage total here. Well, I missed again. A few more shots off gets me another hit, and I managed to set it on fire. And an enemy battleship has just come around as well, which is very troubling because it's at very close range to me, and soon its secondary guns will be able to fire at me. So I switch to torpedoes, fire off 2. I've actually had 2 of my torpedo launchers destroyed, so I've only got 2 torpedoes on each broadside for the rest of this game, which makes it very difficult to kill battleships. But in this instance it wasn't necessary since my team actually killed it before my torpedoes arrive. But I do get to see one of my torpedoes hit the wreck of that battleship. And now the only enemy ship up here is this lonely cruiser. And I'm actually slowing down because I want to pass behind the friendly cruiser here so I can begin to... Well, I was going to approach close to that enemy cruiser, but it's dead now. So I just want to turn behind it so I can go, I suppose, chase down that battleship. It's the nearest enemy ship. And, well, it's not escorted by anything, so it should be maybe not an easy kill, but something that I can kill without too much hassle. If there was a cruiser there, I wouldn't risk it. If there was another battleship there, I probably also wouldn't risk it, since I've only got 2,000 hit points. Which basically is one high explosive shell from battleship could kill me right now. But I begin to approach the battleship. I've actually gone off to this side of the battleship because I want to be on a different heading to it than the friendly cruiser off to my left. That's just so that I can tell the difference between if the battleship's pointing its guns at me and if it's pointing its guns at the cruiser. I've managed to set it on fire, which is very good. Managed to dodge those shots and then fire off 2 torpedoes. And you remember that bit where I said that I shouldn't turn broadside onto the enemy and pull out of torpedo attacks? This is what I was talking about. Basically, as I'm turning, I'm losing a lot of speed, and I get lucky that its guns aren't loaded to fire me when I'm broadside on, but it does get me when I'm nice and slow and an easy target there, and I take a fair bit of damage, not a lot. But again, my allied cruiser is actually able to kill it before my torpedoes arrive, so we still got the kill there. And things are looking pretty alright for us at the moment. There are 2 enemy battleships and a cruiser left, whereas my team has myself, that cruiser behind me, and 2 battleships. The enemy battleship on the right, I believe it's a South Carolina. It's basically, it's going to die. It's heading straight towards 2 of my friendly battleships, which will be able to focus fire down on it, and there's no way it could survive that. But when I decide that I'll contribute by putting a few shots in, of course I'm detected, but I'm not that concerned. We've just spotted the enemy cruiser. It's way back over where they spawned. I can see that both battleships are firing away at my friendly battleships, so I figured I could fire safely and nothing was going to fire back at me. The enemy, well, that one South Carolina is now sunk, which leaves us Kawachi here all by itself. So I'm going to go and do a repeat of my open sea torpedo attack. I start firing away with my guns when I become within my detection range. I didn't want to alert it to my presence any earlier than I had to, although it probably already knew I was there. But since I am detected, I might as well fire away with my guns. Actually, was that in my detection range? It was close to it anyway. So I got a little bit closer than usual before I started firing. This Kawachi's running away from me, which is a big problem because, well, with my manoeuvring, I'm actually not that much faster than it, so it's going to take a while to catch up. So I don't actually have to manoeuvre because no one's shooting at me, but it's a habit, and as I said earlier, probably a good one to have. Well, I managed to set the Kawachi on fire there, and the enemy St. Louis, I believe it's St. Louis, enemy cruiser at least, is firing away at me. Now I've just come within torpedo range, so I fire off one side torpedoes, and again I turn away from the battleship to try and escape when I should be closing in for the kill, and it gives the enemy cruiser a nice easy shot into my side, and well, it killed me. Luckily though I do manage to get 2 torpedoes off, and let's just see what happens. Okay, 1 hit, just a hit, but yeah, that's causing flooding, and I also managed to set that ship on fire, so it's actually still losing hit points to me. But while it is slowly burning and drowning to death, that's kind of all I've got to say about the Sampson. It's a bad destroyer, but destroyers are actually quite fun, so I still actually kind of had fun playing it, but it's still the worst destroyer in the game. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.